All right, this one's gonna be real rough. Not as rough as originally. I would have probably put this in the notes, but I was going to just do chapter five to like eight or something like that, like half an hour, 45 minutes, whatever. But then I listened to it and I was like, this is rough. This is really rough. And normally I'm totally cool with that, like especially earlier on, being like, just get it out there. But the fact that it to me just seemed so unlisten toable. Like, it was like there was just things that were like misspelled the audio, just the AI was just weird about it when it was pronouncing certain things, just spacing was all messed up, just everything about it. I was just looking like I can't even at a base feel comfortable showing this also. I cleaned it up real just a little bit. Nothing of like the big major notes that I'm like putting down or anything like that, but just spaced out a little bit. I just made it smoother. I did a little bit of smoothing out on it, so it shouldn't be too bad. But there's still going to be so many issues. Ages are wrong, times are wrong, the placement of the sun, the weather, that's wrong. Certain conversations where you just don't know who's talking necessarily at any point in time, that's got to be fixed. So it's just a whole bunch of stuff that's going to be going into this next section because I did so much stuff from chapter one to four, which is again funny to say because chapter four isn't just going to be that one little slice. It's just going to go on and on and on and on. Like I would say right now, for the story I'm trying to tell in chapter four, I'm not looking to break it up into parts as we go along or anything like that. A lot of the information we need going forward is going to be all in there, so make it its own story. It has its own thing going on, so working on that is going to be pretty crazy. But yeah, right now, where am I? Yeah, she hasn't even met the kid yet, so I would say maybe I'm like 25% of the way into that story. So a quarter of the way in. And then after that, it'll probably be broken down into like chapter four, five, six, seven, eight, nine, 10, and then the rest of it. But the numbering is all over the place. There's even small notes for myself in what's going to be listened to today. Uh, Whatever. It's not too bad. It's not like previous where before I shifted most of it to the end for my own sanity. Um, it would just be like slapped right in the middle. It's not that bad. This is more of just like a couple spots. I'm just like, remember what you want to say here, and this, and just move on. And there's not a lot of it. There's not a lot of it. So, at the very least, this is like the bare bones. Let's get to it.
Chapter 5. He's never seen the kid look like this before, and he can't imagine what could have happened. Cassandra ran errands for his guild, doing jobs that are otherwise meant for capable adults. More than that, the first time they met 3 years ago, was because she saved his life. His life, a 13-year-old member of the guild saved by a starving 7-year-old blade of grass wielding no more than a sharpened twig. He yelled, pleading with her silent and still form, "Come on, you're okay." He forces out a laugh in desperation. "You don't usually go in for these types of pranks, but if you're starting today you really got me, kid, please, come on. I know whatever it would have to be real bad, but you've seen worse. You've got to have been through worse, right? And you always turn out all right. Wait." He pauses for a moment to think. "Damn it, where the hell is Yez? She's supposed to have been here with me," he says in his panic. The sounds from the edge of the forest was like a siren. Every creature seemed to be crying out all at once in a deafening cacophony. He put his right ear against her back but couldn't hear anything amongst the noise, but just then a look of hopeful uncertainty spread across his face. There was a fight a few weeks ago, and it immediately stuck out as important. "I thought I killed that fat fuck for well, you showed me how to check." He turns her onto her back and takes one of her shoes off, rolling the sock just below her ankle. Then, placing 2 fingers against the back of her ankle, he lets out a sigh of relief. "I owe you for showing me that one, but are you gonna come too? I'm not exactly the biggest guy to go carrying you around." He softly chuckles and says, "I wonder if Lawson wouldn't mind lending a hand," forcing his tone to remain light in case she can hear him. He shakes her softly, but with no response he sets his mind to what he has to do. She was out like a light but breathing softly now. With a pass of his hand inches above her body, the filth was swept away and he tosses it back towards the screaming forest. Overall, she seemed unhurt, but he was the furthest thing from a doctor that you can get and he just didn't feel very confident with that assessment. From off his neck he takes a long scarf and twists it into a sling. Gathering her onto his back, he starts towards a place he knows can help. There's gonna be trouble, but that can wait. You better have a good story, kid, he says, as he makes a slow start back. After a few minutes, he looks up just in time to see the first drops of rain. As he makes his way back towards the town, the atmosphere grows increasingly ominous. Dark clouds rolled across the sky, quickly swallowing the last remnants of sunlight. The air grows heavy with the smell of rain, carrying with it a sharp earthy scent. The wind picks up, whistling through the narrow alleyways and sending dust and debris swirling in eddies. As they enter the outskirts of the slums, the dilapidated state of the buildings become apparent. Crumbling facades lined the streets, their paint long faded and peeled away, revealing the decaying wood beneath. Broken windows were patched haphazardly with boards and tattered sheets, barely keeping out the elements. The streets were littered with garbage and discarded scraps. The outskirts seemed deserted and desolate, with only a few stray figures huddled in doorways, seeking shelter from the storm. The sound of distant thunder rumbled through the air, a low, foreboding growl that seemed to emanate from the very heart of the forest itself. The flickering firelight pouring out of the buildings cast eerie, distorted shadows onto ground. The rain started to fall, first as a gentle drizzle, then rapidly growing into a torrential downpour. The water beat against the rooftops, creating a cacophony of splashes and drips. The once dry ground turned into a muddy quagmire, making each step a struggle. The weather meant he couldn't use the rooftops to cut through, but he still counted it as a blessing. From time to time, Cassandra would cough and spit, but the storm was at least bringing her back to consciousness. He could feel her body returning control over itself, and before much longer he heard her quietly say, "I'm all right now, please put me down," which he did on the spot, but he kept one hand extended ready for her to steady herself if she needed. She didn't. The walk to the guild was uncomfortable for him. Normally he couldn't stop himself from talking, but now the sound of clouds bursting forth tendrils of lightning was all that could be heard. He waited for Cassandra to tell him anything about what just happened, but she never said a word the entire way. After entering the guild he takes her to find a quiet place to talk, before finally asking her, "What happened there?" "The forest was worse than usual today, it's nothing." The look he gives her says that he doesn't believe what she's saying. "I just took a new path, I can avoid it. Don't worry Hales, please." "Fine, but do we gotta get you to Shulosmere? She should take a look at you at least." "No. Is Kilornson waiting for me?" That's one way to put it, if by waiting you mean throwing a tantrum and flipping things upside down. "Good. My mom says that people are easier to fight when they're mad and you're not." "Does that include people with fists the size of a watermelon?" "I think she might adjust her sage wisdom with a few more bits of intel, kid. More to hit when someone's bigger than you, Hales. I just have to worry about getting caught." "You're pretty confident, huh? Well good, because I'm gonna have to go find Yez, and she's gonna flip out when she hears what's going on. And I'm not saying shit about all that with the forest. You're gonna have to pipe up when you're ready. Just tell her it was my decision, she'll understand." "So, your friend is the reason Lawnson's been throwing things around. Hey, Mittens, where have you been hiding?" "Come on Hales, you know I hate when you call me that. It's the first day, so I was out taking count of the new faces." "Since when did uncles put you to work? Yesterday you were still a chubby little baby running around without a diaper." "Hey Cassandra, he used to be so cute. When he was real little we let him pick his own name, so for a while he named himself after the cat that hung around chasing the actual rats. I was like 5 years old." "Yeah, well, some things shouldn't change. Is your sister around?" Rin's talking to uncles, trying to get him to do something about Lawnson. "Damn, alright, let me check in with her, then I'm gonna head out. The rooftops are drying off so it shouldn't take long to spot Yez. Don't get going until I get back, I wanna see you wipe the floor with him. Until then, just hide out." "Got it." "Yeslin came by, looking for you two earlier. She said she's going to try to get some work in, so I expect she'll be somewhere around sunlight. She forgot the time we were supposed to meet up again, I should have guessed." Thanks, Old Man Marbles. Chapter 6. Your little brother is getting too big. What is wrong with you? I've been getting more sentimental in my old age. You know I'm talking about Cassandra. She's 3 years younger than Marbles and you'd pit her against him, she says as she points over the balcony to the large man down below. You guys have her collecting in Hightown. She wants to be part of the important stuff. Uncles won't risk it. If anything crazy happens and her stone goes red, you know how big of a problem that'll be. And if it's true that her mother takes command of her training, then what happens to the guild if she's hurt or killed? That won't happen. It won't, because uncles want Lawson to end the fight as quickly as possible. When he wins, she has to stop getting involved when we tell her to stay out of something. What happens when the kid wins? You're serious. You haven't seen her in a scrap, Rin. The kid almost looks bored if there ain't more than 5 guys trying to kick our ass at once. She could do a lot of good around here, too. Put her to work. I could get my shit done in half the time with her watching my back. Maybe then I'd have time to ask you out properly. Properly? Oh no. No. You're not going to distract me. If she can beat Lawson, then uncles will consider putting her to work. They want to talk to her mother, too. Getting a word with her ma won't be possible, but I might be able to get us a table at Rezion up in Hightown. When the kid beats up your brute, I'll come by to pick you up around third moon. Fine, but it won't happen. And when Lawson wins, you will swear to stop picking on Marbles. Done. But one more thing. It's never ending with you, what else? When I get back, you got to keep Yez out of the fight. I didn't want her here at all, but the kid wants her to see. If she hits me, I'm going to take it out on you tenfold. She won't, trust me. Now I have to check in on your champion down there. He's not in the mood for your jokes, Hales. Everyone needs to lighten up. I'll talk to you later, Rin. Kilornson's mocking laughter fills the courtyard. Ulran, I told you they wouldn't change their minds, so where is the child? Hales, I know you're here, where is your warrior? It's not time yet, old man. She'll show up. Will you use weapons? You're taking this joke too far, Hales. I won't hold back, you understand that, right? Weapons, Lawson. Do you need one or not? It would be embarrassing to hear you bitch and moan after she slices you to ribbons. You looking to cross me too, Hales? Of course not, our styles don't really match up very well. Can't throw a knife unless someone's back is turned. Coward. Exactly. So to confirm, you'll be weaponless, and she can use whatever she wants. She can ride in on the back of a flaming sheer beast for all I care. Yes. Let her use whatever she wants. I'll let her know, but I'm just saying, that's a pretty dumb idea, old man. I'm tired of your mouth, Hales. If I see your face one more time before the girls, I'm going to twist the head off your body. That's all I needed to know, hang tight. I'll be back and then you can have at it. With that, Hales heads out of the guild by taking the route partly upwards to Hightown, but he jumps off onto the rooftops, a few meters into his ascent. He heads towards sunlight, which isn't a place as much as the literal spot in the city where the sun is currently shining. He catches her standing at the opening of an alleyway, wet from the rains, and looking thoroughly irritated. He lets himself down behind her, far enough that she wouldn't hear him. He crouches down, slowly moving up in back of her. Chapter 8. People can be so stupid sometimes, Yeslin thinks. She stands at the entrance of a dimly lit, dead-end alleyway, shrouded in shadows as she observes the residents of the slums bustling about. The humidity weighed heavily upon the air, clinging to the packed dirt street and enhancing the earth-laced odors of urine and blood. The recent rainfall only seemed to worsen the stench, and Yeslin's clothes clung uncomfortably to her breasts and legs, drenched in a mixture of sweat and the oppressive moisture in the air. The slums were no place for outsiders, but everyone had their reasons for venturing into this derelict corner of the city. Yeslin couldn't fathom their motives, but they all appeared the same to her, marked by their smiles or the fact that they smiled at all. It was evident they sought an escape, and today, that fact bothered her more than usual. The night before had been troublesome, and she had to slip out of her client's home without payment. Just as well, she supposed. It was a dull night and she thought she would enjoy a bit of a scene, but she was in no mood for a fight. In jumping out of a window, she had forgotten her money on the table next to his bed. Still, no matter what happened at home, he will come back. She has no monitor to protect her during work, but no client would know that. Kjeld would be more concerned with the guild stepping in to collect her earnings, than with his wife's anger. Though she was unaffiliated, fear of the guild was enough to keep most people honest. She did find it a little surprising, as most couples would be open about picking up a woman like herself. It's a regular occurrence for a client to involve their partner, and it usually meant that she could stay the night without fear of someone smashing her head in, during a jealous fit of rage. But now, her ears pick up the conversation of strangers to the slums, and it was enough to make the last of the night's memories evaporate from her mind. "This is utterly revolting," a young man grumbled to his companion. The man gripped his arm and pulled him closer, whispered loudly, "Are you insane? Keep that to yourself, or we'll never make it out of here." Oscillating between smiling at every beggar with a foolish grin and casting serious glares at his partner, he hissed, "I don't understand why you insist on being here." Yeslin had overheard this conversation before, and she noticed that others had also taken notice. She had to act swiftly, lest they get scooped up. If they were lucky they may have a great time, but the chances were also just as good, that their bodies will be left discarded in the vicinity. As she began to approach the two men, she experienced a surge of emotions. Surprise washed over her, quickly giving way to fear, and then, in the blink of an eye, annoyance. There was only one person who would flip her ponytail over her head, causing it to smack against her forehead with an audible slap. She turned to face a freckled, 16-year-old boy, his face reddened from the effort of stifling his laughter. With all her might, Yeslin unleashed a punch, the white crystal on her wrist catching the light of the rising sun, briefly casting a neon glow as it streaked through the air. The boy tumbled backward, landing on his backside, clutching his face but continuing to howl with laughter despite the filth seeping into his clothes. "What the fuck, Hales?" Yeslin screamed in frustration. "Those two will only bring you trouble," Hales replied, picking himself up and brushing off his clothes. With a wave of his hand, the dirt slid off him, leaving him looking clean despite the truth of his odor. "That first one is looking for a man named Hellas, and I suppose he brought a gift from back home to join the fun. If you tried to pick him up for the day, you would just scare him off and ruin someone else's chances for a good meal. Besides," the boy continues, "Cassandra's over at the guild, and the kid's been wanting to see you." The next burst of venom that was about to release from her lips, caught in her throat at the mention of their mutual friend. "You know what it means if she's around, so the best you can do is get cleaned up and go to her," he says. Yeslin hugs the smelly, annoying young man and silently lets him lead the way. For Yeslin, seeing Cassandra was more important than a full stomach or a warm bed for the night. When that kid was around, she would make sure that nothing would ever hurt her, and she knew that Hales felt the exact same way. The courtyard was washed in the bright light of the high noon sun. Vines clung to the stone walls, their emerald leaves dancing in the gentle breeze. Yeslin burst into yard, but before she could catch a glimpse of Cassandra, strong hands restrained her. The area was hushed, save for the distant chirping of birds and the faint rustling of leaves. The air was thick with anticipation, as if it held its breath, aware of the impending clash. Yeslin's heart hammered in her ears, drowning out the ambient sounds. Elran stood before Yeslin, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't let you interrupt," Elran murmured, her voice laced with a hint of regret. "Lawson says the kid's been stealing the jobs he's assigned," Elran continued. "At first, I thought he was being stupid," Elran confessed, "but I'm kinda starting to think there's actually something going on." Her gaze shifted toward the distant figure of Lawson, a man consumed by frustration and anger. He paced back and forth, his hands clenched into fists. "Even the kid seems pissed," Elran added, her voice trailing off. "But you know she doesn't talk to any of us." Elran's voice grew softer as she divulged more. "He goes out to collect, and everyone says that kids already come by," she whispered. "Uncles just laugh at him, too." Everyone knows nobody would lay a hand on her, but after this last time, he kinda snapped. The tension in the air was palpable, suffusing every corner of the courtyard as Cassandra locked eyes with Kilornson. Their contrasting sizes alone created an awe-inspiring sight, the imposing figure of Kilornson casting a shadow over Cassandra, who stood resolute and unyielding. With each passing moment, Lornson's agitation seemed to intensify, manifesting in the violent sounds of chairs crashing against the walls of the courtyard. "Clear the fuck out then." Kilornson's voice boomed, reverberating through the courtyard. The force of his words struck like thunder, lashing out with a mix of anger and frustration. He towered over Cassandra, his presence an attempt to assert dominance. "She's agreed, Uncle's agreed, so what right do you have to interfere?" He mocked, his voice dripping with contemptuous sarcasm. A sinister smile twisted across his face. "Do you want to take her place?" The courtyard trembled under the weight of his words, a charged atmosphere that threatened to explode at any moment. Kilornson's rage escalated, each syllable a venomous lash at Cassandra's character. The sound of his voice roared through the air, shattering the fragile peace that remained. In the midst of the chaos, Yeslin pushed past Ulran, her determination overpowering any fear that gripped her heart. She broke free just in time to witness the culmination of Kilornson's wrath. "You sure you don't wanna run while you can? This is gonna hurt more than your pride, old man." But Kilornson has had enough. With one hand he lifts Hales above the ground and throws him through the air, hurtling directly towards Yeslin with a terrifying velocity. Time seemed to slow as Hales passed through the air, a projectile on a collision course with Yeslin. The crashing sounds of destruction faded into the background, replaced by the rushing wind and the pounding of her heart. Yeslin's eyes widened in shock, her body instinctively preparing to react, her mind racing to find a solution in the face of imminent danger. Now, in a moment of fury, Hales was flung through the air like a helpless doll. Yeslin's mind raced, the seconds slipping away, leaving her with little time to prevent the impending collision. Her heart yearned to intervene, to avert the calamity about to unfold. But with each passing moment, the inevitability of the collision became clear. Yeslin braced herself, her arms outstretched, desperately attempting to catch Hales in midair. Her eyes briefly flickered to Ulran, who rolled her eyes in a gesture of exasperation. Yet, Elrond's hand rose, a command of, "Enough," whispered into the air. As if responding to Elrond's directive, Hales' body seemed to lose all forward momentum. Time seemed to hold its breath as he tumbled to the ground, limbs splayed out in a graceless descent. A pained groan escaped his lips upon impact, his body crumpling against the unforgiving floor. Yeslin, in a display of reflexes and determination, had managed to break his fall, sparing him from further harm. The sinking feeling in her stomach was starting to alleviate, a mix of relief and concern flooding her senses. She knelt beside Hales, her eyes wide, as a fresh sensation began to arise. Hales, despite having been thrown about 6 meters, seemed his usual upbeat self. "Everything's under control, don't freak out, I just didn't think he'd throw me. Don't give me that look, Yes, The rest of his words were cut off as Yeslin grabbed his neck with both hands and pinned him to the ground, her eyes ablaze with anger. Through choked words, he managed to croak, it was her gag * idea. All at once the grip on his neck released, and though not yet willing to let Hales stand, Yeslin was at least confused enough to listen before she murders her old acquaintance. "You better explain and make it short, Hales. If she gets hurt," but at this, Hales cut in. More than just his usual light tone washed away, as though it was never there. His entire manner of speaking changed, replaced by one whose sound reminded Yeslin of a body being dragged over wet rocks, or the sound a man would make after his throat had been cut. "She'll outlive us both, you know that." For a moment his expression was that of alarm, but after a glance around he coughed a few times before resuming his previous facade. "Just relax, Yes. The kid feels like she's being treated like a kid, and she wants to show that she's not like the rest of the rats, who only line up for a meal. She doesn't belong here, Hales. She's got friends, and a home, a family," but she stopped. Yeslin didn't mean to say the last words and she dropped her eyes in apology. I'm sorry. All right, I get it. But why did you have to let her pick a fight with the largest, ugliest brute in the city? Hales laughed and flashed his toothy, childish grin. It's not that bad. There are others here who hate the kid, you know we take all sorts. Long as they follow the rules while here, nobody cares what you've done elsewhere. But even among that lot, nobody with sense would bother Lawson. Worse yet is that he's been kinder than most to her, as it seems she reminds him of his late son. But all that kindness seemed to really piss her off. Finally she came up to me, pointed him out, then shoved her fist in my face. I sort of got the idea and now, she gets her shot. You're a tiny, harmless little shit. Hey, you fat ass, it's not very nice to insult people. And everyone knows that a tiny matchstick can burn down a whole forest, right kid? It rains constantly, you simpleton. For a moment, a tiny smile curled its way onto the corners of her mouth. Her mother had told her that, and she in turn said it once, years ago to Hales. Lawson is missing the point, she thinks. Just kick him in the balls, kid. Shut the fuck up, Hales. He looks down and Cassandra is gone. He feels a sharp sting, and notices a small slice across his left thigh. She's been prepared to fight while Lawson had allowed Hales to distract him. He wonders if that was planned or if he's really gotten so old and irritable. The cut wasn't deep, though it could have been if she had wished it. From the sidelines, Hales says, "Pay better attention next time, old man." Lawson's eyebrow twitches as the insult followed his own thoughts. For a second his mind wanders off to a world where that idiot Hales could read minds. It isn't a magic he's ever heard of, but he indulged in this bubble of thought as though he was morbidly curious as to what that would be like. But quick as the thought entered his mind, he snapped back to the fight at hand. No one could notice the change, but in that second, Lawson had stepped into a new level of consciousness. He sighs deeply before speaking. "I can't believe I'm saying this, but I have to admit that I really must be getting on in years, I suppose." He laughs in good humor and swings his arm back, far faster than Cassandra had expected he could move. He had only caught her guard with the tips of his outstretched fingers, but it was enough to knock her a foot into the air. As she landed backwards onto the side of her shoulder, the momentum allowed her to roll over to her stomach and push herself upright in a smooth motion, but his response was now noted in her mind. A direct punch wouldn't be pleasant, but she thinks she may be able to withstand it. She'll continue to test him, she decides. The guild had to know what she is capable of, if they were going to let her work with them. He looks at Cassandra with renewed interest. "So that's your secret." As the battle commenced, Lawson charged forward, relying on his brute strength and sheer size to overpower his diminutive opponent. His massive fists swung through the air with bone-crushing force, aimed to shatter anything in their path. The room reverberated with the thunderous impact of each missed blow as the child's agility allowed her to swiftly evade the impending danger. Darting and weaving with incredible speed, Cassandra displayed a remarkable finesse and an innate ability to anticipate her opponent's movements. Her eyes never left Lawson, searching for openings in his defense. With each step, she maneuvered gracefully, evading the thunderous strikes by a hair's breadth. As the battle intensified, Cassandra unleashed her calculated plan. With precision and grace, she took out her small blue knife, holding it like an extension of her own hand. She swiped time and time again, executing each strike with a lethal combination of speed and accuracy. Each cut leaving behind vivid red marks on Lawson's colossal frame. Though lacking in physical stature, Cassandra's resolve was unyielding. Her attacks, infused with a potent mix of conviction and strategy, found their mark with astonishing accuracy. The red marks began to multiply, spreading across the large man's body like a macabre canvas. The giant, previously confident in his invincibility, now bore the evidence of his impending defeat. With each passing moment, Cassandra's silent persistence began to unravel the large man's confidence. The once dominant figure started to falter, his movements growing sluggish, as the relentless blows took their toll. The crowd, initially mesmerized by the spectacle, now held their breath in anticipation of the inevitable outcome. Finally, in a moment of crescendo, Cassandra executed a final, decisive blow. The knife, guided by unwavering focus, left a deep red gash across the large man's chest. The room fell into an eerie silence, broken only by the sound of the large man's collapsing body, hitting the ground with a thunderous thud. Cassandra stood there, blood-smeared and victorious, her eyes betraying neither triumph nor remorse. Her silent expression spoke volumes that now, they would finally take her seriously. And with that, Cassandra moved past Lawson's unconscious body. She walked past Hales with his cheers and applause, past Yeslin, with her boiling anger visible on every inch of her, and out into the night, to make her way back home. As she makes her way past the last few houses that mark the outskirts of the city, Cassandra sees a figure standing in her path. Lawson would never be a good thief, she thought, for he was the only possible person who could cut that form into the night. She hoped for a better fight than their last. "You're a great fighter. I'd have my own son pledge himself to you, had he lived. But he feeds the worms now, child. I only hope to explain something to you that I never had a chance to explain to him." And without another sound, this hulking brute, this mountain of a man, completely vanished. Cassandra didn't know what to do, her mind reeling for some way to comprehend what just happened. Before she could even turn, she felt a massive hand wrap itself around her waist. The grip was unrelenting, and she clawed and bit at Lawson with all her might. He picked her up and held her firm, but with care. Had he wished, she could have been crushed like no more than a bug, and once that realization took its hold, she relaxed. "I understand," she said softly. "You can talk," he said, placing her carefully back onto the ground. "Of course you can," he murmured to himself. "Do you know what I did?" She shook her head, indicating that she did not. "Child, use your eyes. Have you ever seen a human as big as me?" Again she shook her head as to say no. Lawson sighed in exasperation. "Go home. Think. When you return, find a man at the libraries in Old Town named Bemis. He may try your patience, but ask him your questions. The man is incapable of lying." Cassandra nodded. She had much to think about, and the questions seemed to explode like floodwaters bursting down the barriers. Lawson had already begun walking back into town, but Cassandra needed him for one more moment. "What now?" he asked, impatiently as he felt a tug on his coat. But then, his entire body seized as though he had been impaled with a knife. She had hugged him for no more than a second before running away towards the forest. He stood there watching the mere moments it took for the darkness to consume her, then allowed himself for just a few minutes, to really remember how great it felt to be a father.